what we're seeing is that a candidate like Abigail Spanberger, who has had the runway to build a campaign that's really geared around what people are experiencing in this moment. And then she also has the benefit of drawing on her national security experience and really kind of linking together, like you said, these arguments to say that what is happening, this recklessness, this chaos that has ramifications for our democracy, it has ramifications for our national security, and it has ramifications that is linked in inextricably to the fact that you are not seeing things get better. In fact, you are seeing things get worse.
Well, Jessica, it is a pleasure to be with you today. Jessica Mackler is the president of Emily's List, an organization that's been around for 40 years. It was founded to ensure that pro-choice Democratic women have the funding they need to run competitive races. Jessica, it is very nice of you to join us today. You're having a very busy day, I imagine.
I am, but I'm really excited to be here because my favorite thing is to talk about elections and what we're seeing out there. So this is great.
This is the time. First, I thought you'd talk to us for a moment about why an off-year election, and I want folks who aren't familiar with that term to know it means when there's not a midterm election or a big presidential election. An off-year election like this is getting so much national attention. Why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a piece of this is that this is the first major election in Donald Trump's second term. And so you have these elections that are playing out, and we've had some special elections. We've seen really great Democratic overperformance in those special elections. But these elections are the first big elections where we're going to see elections from legislative races to gubernatorial races top of the ticket, and can really get a picture of how the electorate is doing and what it looks like. And I think this is really important, what it looks like for us to drive wins in this moment. And I know a conversation that a lot of people are having is, what does leadership look like in this moment? And on both of those fronts, we have a really incredible model, I think, that is going to be coming out of New Jersey and Virginia to show what it looks like to both win and lead in this time where people are really feeling acutely connected to figuring that out.
And on the bigger picture, for one more beat, a new CNN poll has come out today that shows Trump's disapproval rating is the highest in modern presidential history. I think it's at 63%. He's extremely unpopular. Are these races a referendum on Trump? The political class will say that these races are a referendum on Trump. So tell us, do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, certainly what we see driving voters, a piece of what we see driving voters is that they are very dissatisfied, very unhappy, angry. I mean, dissatisfied doesn't even cover it. They are angry at what they see, this recklessness, the chaos that is coming out of Washington. Voters have been feeling for a long time like things aren't going well for them, and they are looking for leaders who are going to make it better. And Trump came in on this promise of, elect me day one, prices are going to go down, things are going to get better for you. And the opposite is true. And so voters who were already feeling that stress and were already so frustrated with their financial situation, concerned about healthcare, childcare, that's gotten so much worse. So absolutely, in one sense, yes. But on the other hand, I think it's really important that what we're seeing in Virginia and New Jersey and these elections, down ballot too, and that's important, is candidates who are really stepping into that and saying, I see you, I get it, and I'm going to fight every day to make your lives a little bit better, to make them more affordable, to do everything I can to make our schools, our communities, and your own personal situation better. And that part of it is really important because we cannot solely rely on frustration with Trump. We have to leverage that momentum and meet that with leadership. And that's what we're seeing out of candidates like Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, and they're really meeting that moment in their leadership. And I think that combination is really important.
Right. It's kitchen table issues. I want to talk about Virginia and New Jersey. First, I want to acknowledge that there are other big races happening Tuesday. There's a mayor's race in New York. There's a referendum in California. We're not going to be talking about that in this conversation because that's not where Emily's List is playing. But to my audience, I will get into that in the newsletter and in other conversations. Jessica, let's start with Virginia because you're headed there today. This is a race between Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Earl Sears. It is a break the glass ceiling moment. Whoever wins will be the first female governor of New Jersey. They're both accomplished people. Spanberger, a Democrat, is a former CIA officer who spent 3 terms in Congress. Earl Sears is the Republican, also a Marine veteran, lieutenant governor, and was the first Black woman elected statewide in Virginia. So they're both accomplished women in their own right. But Spanberger is pacing well ahead. The polls show her really, like the Democrat, is poised to win. What are the key issues in this race, and why has Spanberger performed so well so far?
Well, Abigail Spanberger's campaign has been run with incredible strength. And that's something that we at Emily's List weren't surprised by, because she's a leader who we've stood behind since she flipped a district in 2018. When she was first elected to Congress, that was a district that hadn't been held by Democrats in decades, that a lot of people did not think at the beginning of the election cycle that we could win. But we were in early with her. And so we saw that strength really coming through. And I think it's also important when we think about the types of leaders that are really effective in this moment, not just at leading, but winning first, because before you can lead, you have to win. And we see that these candidates who came into electoral leadership and public service in a different way in the wake of that first Trump election, that has really shaped their leadership and the way that they have led. And so now she's in a position to really build on that and come into higher office. And we've seen incredible strength in that campaign. I think really what we see here is that she is leaning into her own story, both in terms of her professional background, her personal background, to connect with voters. And that is so important because, again, she is seeing voters across Virginia and saying, I see your pain and I'm going to address it. And she's really campaigned on this affordability agenda, talking about the cost of housing and the cost of energy. And those issues really connecting into what Virginians are feeling. That's driving the strength of this campaign right now.
So one of the themes I think is worth acknowledging is that, there's been some fair or unfair criticism that the Harris campaign last cycle leaned too much into this message around threats to democracy, that Trump is a threat to democracy, and that didn't motivate enough voters to get out, and that Democrats really need to talk about kitchen table issues. Your energy prices are going up, your grocery prices are going up. One of the things Spanberger, and correct me if I'm wrong, seems to be doing well is she managing to connect Trump's undemocratic behavior to your rising costs at home and linking those two somehow, so it's not one or the other.
Yeah. And I think that what's really important here is that you start with meeting voters where they are, right? And so, we talk about this, it is affordability, but to me, it's a little bit even bigger than that, because it's the idea of candidates, candidates who get it. Candidates who understand what you're grappling with and can tap into that. When you meet voters where they are, and when you demonstrate that you care about what they're experiencing and what they're feeling, then you have a lot of room to grow. We don't need to spend a lot of time back in 2024, but we have to acknowledge that Kamala Harris had 100 days to do a lot of different things.
I don't mean this as a criticism of Harris.
No, I know you weren't, but I think it's important to, when we look at what's happening now, what we're seeing is that a candidate like Abigail Spanberger, who has had the runway to build a campaign that's really geared around what people are experiencing in this moment. And then she also has the benefit of drawing on her national security experience and really kind of linking together, like you said, these arguments to say that what is happening, this recklessness, this chaos that has ramifications for our democracy, it has ramifications for our national security, and it has ramifications that is linked in inextricably to the fact that you are not seeing things get better. In fact, you are seeing things get worse. And so I agree that I think that's a powerful combination. And she's done a really great job of making this argument effectively to voters.
And one of the things that could be interesting if she succeeds is that it could be a lesson for Democrats that you don't have to do one or the other. It's a kind of a linking message, but we'll see. One last note on Virginia. Last time around, Glenn Youngkin, the current Republican governor, ran in the closing days very much on hitting hard on divisive social messages, specifically parental rights around transgender students in schools, parents losing control over what their kids are taught, et cetera. The Republican has tried to bring those issues to the fore again. Are they succeeding at this time?
Well, this is classic Republican fear-mongering, and it's a tactic that we see over and over again. They use it on a number of different issues to try to drive that wedge with voters, to really scare voters into feeling like, okay, I have to be with Republicans. In particular, I think right now what you're seeing is that Republicans understand that their economic agenda is not working and that they are not connecting with voters on issues, those kind of issues that voters are bringing into the ballot box. And so they're really relying solely on these fear-mongering tactics to get the job done. And that really is falling flat with voters. And I think what this comes back to is an understanding that as Democrats, when we do the work of connecting with voters and really having an agenda and a vision that speaks to what they are concerned about, that is the most effective way for us to get those voter support and build a victory. And that's kind of the moment in which you see these fear-mongering tactics really fall flat.
She also did not get Trump's endorsement, so that could be part of the undertow that I don't know how that plays in Virginia. I guess we'll see.
I don't know that anybody wants his endorsement right now in Virginia.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's not a very popular Trump state. Let's talk about New Jersey. New Jersey's, this is a state in which the Democrat Mikey Sherrill is running against Jack Ciattarelli. Ciattarelli is a former assembly member who has run for governor. This is his third time. Trump has endorsed him, and he has hugged Trump and his policies tight in this race. Mikey Sherrill is a Navy helicopter pilot, a former U.S. attorney, a member of Congress. This is a closer race. It's kind of razor thin right now. Affordability has also been at the heart of this race. Would you describe for us the key issues and what voters are like, sort of the closing messages on each side?
Absolutely. And here too, we've seen Mikey Sherrill really run an incredibly strong campaign. She had a very competitive primary. I think that's important for people to keep in mind when they think about, a lot of people look at New Jersey and they say, why is it so close? She had an incredibly competitive primary. She has a much stronger candidate when you look at kind of, what we're seeing in Virginia. And Jack Ciattarelli, he's run 3 times, but he also has that name ID that comes baked in with that. That's just a different dynamic. And this is a state that has a pretty long history of electing Republican governors. So from the get-go, we expected that this race was going to be pretty tight. Mikey Sherrill has entered into that with a lot of strength. And again, really focusing on affordability. The cost of housing is something we hear a lot from voters in New Jersey, people who are really concerned that they won't be able to live in the same community that they've been in for years and years. And so they say, am I going to be able to stay in this community and watch my grandkids grow up? I don't know that I can afford that. Or maybe my kids are thinking about leaving the state because things have gotten so expensive. And so that's something we've seen from Mikey Sherrill. She's run a really Jersey-centered campaign. She had a great online series called State of the Plate, where she met voters at diners and talked about what they were really experiencing. I think, again, demonstrating that she really understands the needs of New Jersey. And then this contrast with Ciattarelli is really important because, like you said, he has embraced Trump, kind of hugged him really tight, can't find a difference, any issue that he is separated with Donald Trump, any problem he has with them. And so when you think about the big picture issues like reproductive freedom, our rights and our freedoms that are under attack, Ciattarelli has said he would emulate the Donald Trump Supreme Court, that really extremist judges, but also things like the Gateway Tunnel project, that is a really important infrastructure project in New Jersey under threat from Donald Trump, or the tariffs that are really wreaking havoc on New Jersey businesses. Ciattarelli has really embraced that. So in these closing days, that's really important. And it's been something that has really driven, I think, the strength of Mikey's campaign. She's connecting with voters on the things they're worried about, but she's also making sure to make really clear that it's not just that Ciattarelli supports Donald Trump, it's that he's going to bring that recklessness, that chaos that people are so frustrated with. He's going to bring that and double down on it in New Jersey.
And for folks listening, this is one of the reasons what Jessica's just described, why the whole nation watches these races. If Ciattarelli wins, it will be interpreted, people will try to analyze, is this a sign that Trump is helpful at the ballot box and other people should hug him tight come the midterms? And if Ciattarelli loses, the inverse, will Republicans take some distance from Trump, and could that even lessen Trump's grip over the Republicans in Congress? I want to move on to one other topic on New Jersey before moving to the next race, which is, I want to give folks something to look at. Passaic County in New Jersey. This is one place people watch. Why is there such a focus on Latino voters there?
Well, there's a couple of pieces. Obviously, we saw in 2024 underperformance across a number of groups, and people were looking at the engagement with Latino voters, really making sure and thinking about what is it the Democrats need to do. We can't take voters for granted. And we saw that very clearly in the past election cycles. I've been really excited to see, I've been following along both. I was on the ground a little bit, but also online, the work that Mikey Sherrill's campaign has been doing in engagement engaging the Latino community, really leaning into, kind of, you said, I'm here. I might not be good at it, but I'm going to speak Spanish with you all. I think those efforts really matter. They are running an incredible ground game in New Jersey, one of the largest volunteer operations ever run. And so in a community where we really know that we have to make sure that we are engaging and that we are meeting those voters and we're not taking them for granted. We've really seen Mikey Sherrill lean into that and meet that moment. But the reason for that attention is because we learned the hard way in many ways that we have to be mindful of all of these different voting blocks, and so engaging those voters continually and making sure that they don't feel like, oh, we're just kind of assuming that those votes are going to come our way is a really important piece of building the coalition to the victory for Democrats in other states as well.
Right, because part of Trump's win was, well, one aspect of Trump's win was an increase in support among Latino voters compared to prior Republicans. And so this is sort of being seen as sort of a bellwether or a case study in whether some of those Latinos will either come back to Democrats or just not vote Republican. One other topic I actually did want to ask you about in New Jersey, and you might not know the answer to this, is we're expecting election monitors, both in New Jersey and also in California, where there's the redistricting ballot initiative. Do you know anything about what they're meant to do or what impact that could have?
Well, look, I mean, we know that elections are very fair, very secure. We've seen that carry out, across the country. I think that we are mindful of any attempts from the Trump administration to really preemptively cast doubt on the results of an election. That's something that certainly, he is known for. And so I know that the teams in each of these states and in California as well are really keeping a close eye on what is happening, making sure that people are able to cast their ballot without any fear of interference. We've seen really great engagement across Virginia and New Jersey so far in terms of early vote and mail-in balloting. So we feel really good about the electoral process, but that's what we're going to be keeping an eye on, is kind of any sign that they are trying to make it seem harder to vote, or also that they are setting up for an argument that the results of the election are not valid. And those are things that we're going to be really attentive to. I know the campaigns are as well.
Brave new world. Okay, another race that switching states a little bit to, well, we're going to Pennsylvania next. Okay. Folks all remember that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was pivotal in helping decide the outcome of the 2000 election, or preventing Trump from going further with his claims. Emily's List is investing in a state Supreme Court race there. There are 3 Democratic Supreme Court justices up for retention votes, where the public can say you'll stay or you'll go, one of whom is a woman. If Republicans flip that court seat, what could that mean for abortion rights and ballot access in 2026 and 2028?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought this race up, because oftentimes these are the races that fly a little bit under the radar screen, especially, as you said, in an off year, but they're critically important. State Supreme Courts are often one of our last lines of defense against the attacks that we're seeing coming out of Washington, against the efforts of Republicans in these states to drive an extreme agenda, and particularly on the 2 issues that you mentioned: reproductive freedom, voting rights. Christine Donahue is a Supreme Court justice who has authored a number of really important opinions on those 2 issues, including protecting the state's mail-in ballot law and provisional ballots as important access points for voters. So that is one of the reasons that it is a big priority for Emily's List. These are critical centers of power for us, because we need to make sure that we have courts that are going to uphold the law, that are going to be fair and impartial, that aren't going to be driven by the extremist agenda of Republicans. And so that's really what's at stake here. Anytime we have given Republicans power, we have seen them use that power to roll back our rights and our freedoms. And that's true for voting rights. It's true for reproductive freedom and abortion access. And so we know that in Pennsylvania tomorrow, these 2 issues are absolutely on the line. They're on the ballot. That's what is at stake. Again, is a question of who is going to protect the law, who's going to stand up for the law, who's going to stand up for impartiality and fairness, or whether we're going to hand this over to somebody who's going to drive a really extreme agenda around it.
Let's do just a quick beat on the Texas special election. You all are involved in House District 18. Folks might remember Sylvester Turner, a member of the House. He died earlier this year. And so this is an open seat. It's a safely Democratic seat. So why would you even throw money into a seat that Democrats are expected to hold?
Well, one thing that I think it's really important, just as a baseline to remember, is of course that the House is very narrowly divided right now. We have seen some of these votes come down to just a couple of votes, and these vacant seats are a part of Republicans' effort to hold on to power and use the power that they have to deny representation, and to ensure that they can enact this agenda. This is true for Texas 18, in which Republican Governor Abbott has tried to delay this election, to extend the period of time that the people in this district are without representation. We also see this playing out. People may have heard about and seen news around Adelita Grijalva, another woman who Emily's List was proud to support in Arizona, who Mike Johnson is refusing to seat again because he wants to avoid accountability. So these races are important to ensure both that the people in these districts have representation that they deserve, but also they play into the overall balance of power and what Republicans are able to do. And you see that reflected in Republican behavior, right? Like if they didn't worry about this district, they wouldn't delay the election. They would make sure to seat Adelita Grijalva, but they're trying to hold on to that grasp on power. And so it's really critically important that this seat has somebody who's going to stand up and be a bold leader. And Amanda Edwards, who's running in that special election, is exactly the bold leader we need to go toe to toe with Mike Johnson and toe to toe with Donald Trump in this time.
You are a very effective advocate for the candidates you're backing. One of Emily's List's core missions is to ensure abortion access and elect women officials to ensure that that remains our reality. I'm wondering how abortion access and issues around it are polling, and how sentiment around reproductive rights has changed since Trump has taken office, not since Dobbs, but since Trump's election.
Well, we continue to see that abortion access and reproductive freedom are major drivers of votes. One of the things that's really important when talking about reproductive freedom as an electoral issue is to remember that this has often been most effective. And when I'm talking about it really as, in a conversation with voters, when we are talking about how Republican candidates, what their positions are on this issue and where they stand on it, is really a values judgment for voters. And for a lot of voters, a really core set of voters, it's a deal breaker issue for them. When they find out that a Republican wants to ban abortion, wants to roll back access, that is a critical deal breaker issue. And so what we see playing out in New Jersey and Virginia, we've seen this throughout these campaigns, is that this continues to be an important part of the conversation with voters. So we have to I say it's a both and. We have to both meet voters where they are on the issues that they're thinking about every day. Why are these eggs so expensive? How in the world am I going to figure out how to get childcare and get to work and all of those different pieces? That's really important. What do I do about rising energy costs? That conversation needs to happen. And we need to be talking about where these Republicans stand on reproductive freedom. So in Virginia, where Winsome Earl Sears cast the tie-breaking vote against ensuring a right to contraception, that is a really important piece of the puzzle for voters. And that's what's driving, really the strength in Spanberger campaign, is doing that both and.
And does that also reach, are you seeing that for sort of swing Republicans, moderate Republicans, suburban women who may have voted for Trump once and now they might be frustrated? Or is that crossing party lines? Is abortion crucial to independence?
It is across party lines, across kind of demographics, geographics. We see that this is an issue that largely, voters are really overwhelmingly in agreement with us on. They believe that this is an issue that is a private personal decision that the government should not be a part of. And when they are confronted with Republicans, whether you're talking about a House of Delegates candidate in Virginia or Jack Ciattarelli wanting to create that extremist court in New Jersey, they are really driven by that issue, and they will reject Republicans who share these beliefs across the board. And like you said, independents, Republicans, Senate Republicans, Democrats, it is a motivating issue and it is a persuasion issue for voters. This continues to be impactful.
May I ask a couple just bigger picture questions? Since Emily's List was founded 40 years ago, we are in a very different moment right now where for folks who want to elect Democrats, there is a clear sense that Trump is a threat to America's norms, institutions, even democracy itself, certainly for women's health and abortion access. I hear some Democrats say things like, we can't care about the gender of a politician we're getting behind. We just need to elect more, this is what they'll say, Democrats, to get more Democrats in Congress, in office, and stop Trump. What is your response to that? And why do you think it's still important to back women candidates?
When people come to me and say, I just want to win, right? Reflecting that argument, I say, me too. And what I can tell you is that oftentimes we talk about electing women through a framework of what does it mean when they get into office, right? And we can talk about what it means to have representation, and that matters. Absolutely. But also backing women candidates, it's a strong electoral strategy. And what I mean by that is that we have shown, and Emily's List has proven this time and again, that the women that we support, they are often the strongest candidates. And particularly in this moment where voters are saying to us, I am frustrated by my own financial situation. I am worried. I don't know where to go from here. That a key to this is meeting them in that need with candidates, again, who truly get it. And women who are often the ones who are balancing the checkbook at the end of the day, who are figuring out how to deal with caregiving, whether that's their children or their aging parents, who are at the grocery store getting those groceries. They have been in this. When I look at the candidates that we are running this election cycle, who are at the center of taking back power in these states and will be in taking back power across the country, the reason that they are so strong and successful as candidates, not just as leaders in terms of their legislative work, is because they get it and because they've lived these lives and they can draw on those experiences, whether they're personal experiences, professional experiences, and they bring those to voters. And it's a really easy way for them to connect with those voters and say, I am going to fight for you. And you know I'm going to fight for you because I've been in your shoes. I have lived through these struggles. So I will say to anybody who's just once says, I just want to win, the way we win is by supporting strong women candidates in these critical races, because that is the model for leadership going forward.
In our last few minutes, I want to ask you about two trends. One is this trad wife trend that's getting all this publicity and attention as if it's just sweeping the nation. I spend a lot of my time online, so I do see there's this online movement glamorizing stay-at-home moms, usually led by women who have very public, professional lives themselves and are in no way stay-at-home, non-working people. Do you see that as a real phenomenon that's sort of expressing itself among voters? And is it resonating with younger voters?
Well, I think this is something that we have to be really attuned to, because again, we've seen what happens when we take voting blocks for granted, and women have been at the center of Democratic coalitions for victory in every election. That's particularly true as we look to midterm elections. It is critically important that we address the issues that women voters are caring about, and that we're thinking about how we get those women voters across the finish line. When I look at phenomenons like this, I always think we have to kind of both not take for granted, but not go overboard in over. And I think that that's probably where we are right now. But what's going to be really important, again, is really providing women, whether we're talking about younger women, older women, kind of across the board, providing women with candidates who can really connect with them and break through and make sure that we are not taking that for granted, leaving open that opportunity for Republicans to really drive a wedge and peel off some of those voters. And so I would say, yes, we should be really attuned to this. And also, we know that women are going to be the drivers of Democratic victories in 25 and 26.
Interesting. So it's like being a mom has value, all that stuff. Last question. Trump in the White House has been effectively physically erasing women's legacy in the White House. He has destroyed the East Wing. He has destroyed the Rose Garden and Jackie O's other garden. He's even removed First Lady portraits. Symbolically, what does that tell you about where we are as women in this country today? Or does it tell us anything and it's particular to Trump?
Yeah, I mean, what it tells us is that, is something that is reflected both in the policy and in the culture and in kind of these actions within the White House, is that this is not a man, a president, and certainly not a party or a movement that will stand up and fight for women. And in fact, the opposite is true, that with their power, they're using that power to roll back our rights and freedoms, to make it harder for women to live their lives freely, to make it harder for them to care for their families. And from kind of on every front, we are seeing that play out. I think we have to be really mindful of the way that this administration and this movement sees women and where they want us. That goes back to kind of what you were saying about this model of a trad wife. Like that is their goal. Whether or not voters are responding to it, that is their goal. And so we have to do everything in our power to push back and fight back and counter that with those examples of women who are stepping up and leading and who are going to be our leaders going forward, because it is reflective of where their agenda is and that they have no space in their party and their movement for women.
Jessica Mackler, president of Emily's List, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your passion with us. I appreciate it on a very busy moment.
Thank you. Happy to be here.